My name is Maria Weiner, and I'm the president of Florida Caregivers Network. So I am so ready to start this day. I've been ready for the past 7 months.
So have we.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second annual Caregiver Conference, Getting Real About Reality. Today will be a special day for all the caregivers in this room and professionals that care or know someone that lives with dementia. I hope that by the end of this day, you guys are re-energized with all this information we're going to give you, have the tools, have all the resources for you to take care of your loved one. So we're going to start and we're going to get real about reality. Our next speaker, Linda Burhans, is a national speaker on caregiver advocacy and the author of the book, Good Night and God Bless. A heartfelt story about the joy and challenges when caring for a parent. As an expert in caregiver advocacy, Linda has facilitated over 1,000 support groups and workshops for caregivers. She shares lessons learned and coping tools with thousands of caregivers who attend her events or read her work. Her weekly blogs provide expert guidance on resources and best practices for caregivers all over the country. The most important thing she teaches is that caregivers need and deserve the time and space to take care of themselves. Amen for that. Whether you read the book or meet Linda in person, you will quickly realize that she truly lives by her mission to acknowledge, motivate, and appreciate all people and inspire others to do the same. Please welcome Linda Burhans.
Good morning, Seminole. Give yourselves a round of applause for showing up. You know, because if you don't show up, you can't learn anything new, you can't meet new people. It's nice to see this caregiver smiling because some of you are a little tired, some of you are a little worn out, overwhelmed. You know, there was a study by the University of Pittsburgh that 63% of the caregivers over the age of 65 are dying before the person they're taking care of. Scary, isn't it? And I think that's because of what I call the AAA dilemma. The AAA dilemma is caregivers don't ask for help, they don't accept help, and they don't acknowledge themselves. You know, we think as caregivers, this is my responsibility. This is my spouse, or my mom, or my dad, or my sister, and I shouldn't burden anybody else with this. I should do this all by myself. We know how it takes a village to bring up a kid. It takes a village to take care of a senior. So I suggest to caregivers to take a little time to write down some things you can accept help with. Because what happens is, your friend from church or your neighbor or whatever, they come over and they say, is there anything I can do to help you? And this is what the caregiver says every time. No, I'm okay. No, I'm okay, it's okay. It's not okay, we know it's not okay. And I think part of the reason we do that is because caregivers are running around in that little tornado going, I can do it, I can do it. And you're thinking about, what the heck could you help me with? Taking somebody to the bathroom or going to the doctor, just doing meds or doing whatever? Yeah, maybe they could help you with something like that. Because what happens is, they keep asking, can we help you, can we help you? And you keep saying, no, you're okay, and then they stop asking. Because now they don't want to feel like they're in your space, you know, or they're intruding or anything like that. And then the caregiver is at home at night crying, I have to do this all by myself. Well, you said no to every single person that wanted to help you. So if you sit down and take a little bit of time to write a list of some things that you can accept help with, then when your neighbor comes over, you can whip out the list and say, hey, could you mow my lawn? They say, yeah, I've been asking you for 6 months. No problem, I'd love to mow your lawn. But people are asking you because they want to help you. Or just give them a list. And say, anything on this list would be great for me. Another thing, try to be specific. Because they'll call up and they'll say, or they'll see you and say, if you just need me, call me. You're not going to call. But if they say, if you just need me, call me, and you say, Tuesday I have a hair appointment. Do you think you could come at 2 o'clock and stay with Mom? 99% of the time they're going to say, yeah, sure. But you're not going to, I know you're not going to just call them up and say, could you come and hang out with my mom while I go get my hair cut? You know, one woman came and heard me speak, and she sent me an email shortly after. And she said, I thought about what you said when I went home, Linda. And I made my list, and I only put one thing on my list. And if anybody asks if they can help me, I say, if you can come over any afternoon between 2 and 4 and let me take a nap, that would be wonderful. And her next line was, and I'm pleased as punch to let you know that I'm now napping 7 days a week, and my husband is getting 7 different visitors that had stopped coming. Win-win, because you know what? As much as we think we're such great caregivers, sometimes your loved one is like, bye, see ya. I kind of have enough for you too. It's true. So I think the most important thing is to take those resources. Get into support groups. I facilitated over 1,000 support groups. I'll tell you, sometimes I go into a support group and I don't say a thing. Just everybody in there talks to each other and gives us good ideas. I had a woman come into a group a couple months ago, and this might sound ridiculous, but I'll tell you the story anyway. She's taking care of her companion. I think she's like 86 and he's like 89 or something. And he fell down, he broke his shoulder, and he lives in an independent living community. She lives in her own apartment, but she's angry now because her social life has stopped. And she feels like she has to go over every day and she has to help him, and she's just really angry about it. And she says to me, and the worst thing is, every day he spills his chocolate milk. Every day he spills his chocolate milk, and I gotta get down on my hands and knees, or I gotta have the carpet cleaner to come in and clean up that chocolate milk. I said to her, only give him a cup with a lid on it. She said, what? I said, a cup with a lid on it. What, from McDonald's or something? I said, no, you can go to, the woman's 86. I said, you can go to Target or Bed Bath & Beyond. They got great cups with lids on it and everything. I said, just try it. Well, now she's become a caregiver groupie. Because a couple weeks after that, she came to one of my other groups and she walked in and she's like, you are the queen! Put a lid on it. But sometimes it's just that little thing that we don't think about that can make things easier for ourselves. Another thing that I think can help your caregiving journey, and I found this through a lot of experience here now, is if you can find some purpose for your loved one. Because there's nothing worse than taking care of somebody that besides being ill is depressed. Because then the whole house becomes depressed and everybody becomes depressed. They'll even have grandchildren in houses becoming depressed because everybody else is depressed. When I took care of my mom used to say to me, Linda, is there anything I can do to help you? And I say, Mom, there's some laundry in the basket there. Do you think you could fold it? She said, I don't want to do that. 15 minutes later, Linda, is there anything I can do to help you? Mama, there's some dishes in the sink. I don't want to do that. But my mom was a legal secretary in her day. And being a legal secretary was a big deal to her. So one day I went to Staples, and I bought 500 envelopes, and I printed out 500 phony letters, and 500 phony labels, and said, Mama, if you could just help me with this, it would be so great. It took her 3 nights between Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy to finish stuffing all those envelopes. But when she came, she was so proud that she was now doing something to help me. She felt so good about it. I mean, it was the best $20 I ever spent. Threw it in a dumpster on the way out. But then I found some real estate brokers after that that loved to do mailings. So my mom did all their stuff for them. Stapling and, whatever it was. But it made her feel good. I had a woman come into a group a few months ago. Her mom had just passed away. And she said, my dad is just so depressed, Linda. He just sits in his chair day after day after day. He's not doing anything. He's not even barely living. I don't know what to do. And she's crying and she's telling this to me. I said, tell me something he used to do when he was younger. She said he used to build these big model ships with all the little masts, and all the little pieces on it. I said, could he do that anymore? She said, no, his hands are kind of like this now. I said, can we try an experiment? She said, I'll try anything. I said, go to the craft store. They have these wooden cars that have like 8 pieces to put together, like a kid would put together. So buy a dozen of them and bring them to Dad. I know this nursery school down the block could really use some of those, so she went to Dad and she said, Dad, this nursery school down the block really needs these cars. It needs somebody to paint these cars and put them together. Do you think you can do that? Guess what? She called me a few days ago. Dad's on his 16th dozen, and he's off his antidepressant. And now the kids sent him thank you notes. He's got a whole wall of fame with his thank you notes with his cards. How simple. How simple that is. Sometimes you just have to make those matches. And you know what? Kids need to know about what's going on. Kids need to know about Alzheimer's and dementia. I have custody of my 2 grandchildren, so I have a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old, and I teach them as much as I can because they're going to be taking care of me someday. I hope. They tell me they'll drive me around. We'll see. So I have to tell you another story about purpose, and this just shows you a simple way that you can figure out something. One of the things I do is I speak to youth groups about random acts of kindness, and I was speaking to this group, and one of the teachers says to me, see this little boy over here? His parents have 3 jobs, and they're still poor. This little boy has to come home every night and make dinner for his brother and sister. He's a great kid, but this kid is struggling in reading. We've got to find something to do to help this kid. Well, don't you know what? The day before, I did a support group, and a woman cried to the entire support group and said, my husband is now confined to a bed for the rest of his life. He's a retired English teacher and he feels useless. Woohoo! So I go in and meet the elder gentleman the next day, and I said, I have a little boy that's struggling in reading. Do you think he could come and read to you a couple days a week? And he goes, I guess so. And I thought, ooh, maybe this isn't such a great idea. And I met with the little boy, and I said, I have this elderly gentleman that's really lonely. Do you think you could go read to him 2 days a week? And he said, yeah, my mom said, yeah, I'd love to do that. About 2 weeks later, the wife calls me. She calls her husband Mr. Ornery. She said, Linda, I got to tell you, on the 2 days a week that Michael comes, Mr. Ornery is happy from the minute he opens his eyes in the morning until he closes them at night, anticipating Michael coming and what they're going to talk about. And then I meet Michael in the supermarket, and he says, Mrs. Burhans, did they have milk boxes outside your house when you were a kid? Yeah, they did. So Mr. Ornery is happy 2 days a week. Michael's learning a history that'll be lost if we don't speak to our seniors. And at the end of the year, Michael's reading grade went up from a D to an A. At the beginning of the summer, Mr. and Mrs. Ornery decided to move back to Michigan to be with their family. And Michael was heartbroken, but now Michael Skypes with him over the computer. A couple months ago, Mrs. Ornery called me and she goes, we got to change his name. I said, what? No more Mr. Ornery. I said, what's going on? She said, he's Mr. Happy. I said, what's going on? He now has 7 children that read to him, and 2 of them call him Grandpa because they never had a grandpa. She said, my husband is still confined to that bed, but he's happier than he's been in 20 years. And how do you think it makes her feel? And how do you think it makes their grandchildren feel? And their neighbors and everybody that comes? Because we all have a purpose. And we all need to know that. You know, caregivers come to my support groups for a period of time, and then their loved one dies and they still come back. And their biggest regret is that during their caregiving experience, they were too task-oriented. You just run and run and run, and are they eating? Are they taking their meds? Are they going here? Are they doing that? Stop. Sit down and talk, because what's going to happen? It's going to be over and it's going to be too late. There's going to be no time to share those memories. There's not going to be any time to talk. There's not going to be any time to laugh. You know, one woman said, my mom's going through chemo and she's sick all the time. Yeah, I get it. Remember when my mom had her chemo, we'd have to pull over on the side of the road sometimes if she was sick, and she'd be embarrassed, and she'd feel bad because she got sick in my car, and blah, blah, blah. Who cares, Mama? We would clean it up, we'd go rent an I Love Lucy movie. I'd make her a shake or something like that, and just spend some time with her. Everything else can be done later. Like I said, I don't want to be one of those people that are older, sitting in a chair all by myself and nobody's talking to me, because I have a lot to offer. I have one woman who is 96 years old, and all she does is cut out things for the teachers in school. She cuts out the heart, she cuts out the shamrock, she cuts out what's ever going on. Simple for her to do. The kid sent her a thank you note. She went to visit one of the classes, 96 years old. Easy, and those teachers need help every single day. So figure out a way that your loved one can do something. Another woman came into my office and she said, I told her the story. She came back a few weeks later with 50 crocheted crosses with little prayers in them. She goes, she found her purpose. What do I do with them? I said, don't worry about it. So we bring them around to shelters and different places. But there's always something that can be done. There's always something that can be done. One thing I was thinking when the police department was up here speaking a little while ago is another tip that I think is a good idea. I've heard stories where caregivers take care of their loved one and they just decide to go run out to Walgreens or to go wherever, and I'll be back in 20 minutes, and then they go out and they have a car accident and they're knocked unconscious. And their loved one is home. Their loved one thinks they're going to be home in 20 minutes. They're going to be home in a half hour. Or if their loved one has some memory problems, doesn't have any idea when they're going to be back home. Put a little sticky note on the back of your driver's license that says, I care for such and such a person who needs me 24/7. This is the phone number to contact them, because they won't know. And it's a very simple thing to do. Stick that little sticky thing on the back of your driver's license. Then if, God forbid, you had an accident and you were unconscious, they pull out your license, they're going to see that note and they're going to be able to do something about it. These are the things we don't think about. We don't realize exactly how important we are as caregivers to our loved ones. I mean, we take care of everything. And get into a support group. Please, if it's not mine, it's someone else's. In your folders, you'll see a list of a whole bunch of support groups that I've compiled, because it really makes a difference. You know, I had a woman come into a group a while ago, and she walked in, and she was weeping from the minute she got there. And she said, you know, I just had to put my husband into a community, and he hates me, and he never wants to talk to me again. And one of the other girls in the group says, yeah, that's part of the process. He'll probably be okay in like 30 to 60 days. And I just saw the woman go. A little while later, all of a sudden, she blurted out, she said, my husband thinks I'm cheating on him. She said, I've been with him for 60 years. I would never look at another man. And one of the other ladies in the group said, that's part of the disease, honey. I remember going through that. But you just saw the woman go. Because if she hadn't come to that support group, she might not have even never said that out loud. Said it to, you know, somebody in her church or her neighbor. She might have been too embarrassed, you know, especially with the generation we're dealing with. We're dealing with the greatest generation in the world. The generation that believed in sickness and health to the least part. The generation that believed in taking care of each other. I'm a little scared about these next generations that are coming up. It should be interesting, if anything. You know, I have one group that I do, it's called Caregiver Clubhouse. It's just for men. Because I would have one guy in this group and one guy in that group and one guy over here, and one of the guys says, Linda, do you think we can just do a group for men? You know, men have some different issues. I said, we can do that. He said, do you think you can handle us? I said, I'll do my best. Well, this group, each man, I have 5 regular guys that come to this group, have been married over 60 years. Each one of their wives is in a community with Alzheimer's. And what they do is they go and they feed them lunch, and they go there and they feed them dinner, and then they go home and cry. And that's what they do every single day, because that's what they know. And that's the promise they made. Somebody said, why do you keep going every day when she doesn't know who you are? And he says, because I know who she is. Because I know who she is. And a while ago was I do the group once a month, and I have the 5 regular guys, and then I have other guys that like float in and float out. I'm getting ready for my group that day, and my 5 guys didn't show up. My 5 guys have showed up every single group for the past 2 years. I started getting a little panicky. So I deal with the other people that were there, and then right after that, I start calling them up. I'm like, what's the matter? 3 of them went fishing together, and 2 of them went golfing together, because that's what you told us to do, Linda. I said, not every day in my group. What are you guys doing to me here? But I got off the phone and I cried. Because it took me 2 years to convince them to do something for themselves. And the great thing is, they're all more or less in the same boat. So they can talk about it if they want to and they get it, or they don't have to talk about it if they don't want to because they don't. And that makes a big difference, because you know what it's like, especially if you're dealing with somebody with Alzheimer's and dementia. If people don't get it, they don't have a clue. They don't get it at all. So my best advice to you is to take a little time for yourself. As I said, I have custody of my grandchildren, so I'm a different kind of caregiver. And I'm also taking care of my ex-husband who has lung cancer now, so that's a whole nother journey. But I get up every single morning and I walk my dog, and I live by Lake Seminole, and when I get up every morning I take a picture of the sunrise or a flower or a duck or whatever. And as I'm walking, I post it on Facebook and I say, good morning, Seminole, and then I email it to my stepmother and my brother and my sister every single morning. That's my good morning, touch base with them. And I sit down in the dock and I say my prayers and start the day. But I can't tell you how many more beautiful things I've seen since I've been doing this. I've been doing this for about 2 years now. You know, we live in a beautiful area. There's beauty all around us, but we don't even see it. And especially as caregivers, we don't see things. But I forced myself to get into that habit. And now I'll be driving out, I'll see a pretty flower or something, I'll pull up on this side of the road, and my grandchildren are like, oh God, here she goes again. You'll appreciate it one day, I swear you will. Are there any questions or comments? Any questions that you have about caregiving or solutions?
What were your three A's?
The AAA dilemma: caregivers don't ask for help, they don't accept help, and they don't acknowledge themselves. You know, it was funny when I first started doing this about 5 years ago, I had to educate caregivers on who they were before I could help them. Because people would say, I'm not a caregiver, I'm the faithful spouse, I'm the good daughter, I'm the nice sister or whatever. And I'd say, do you do this, do you do that, do you do this, do you do that? And they'd be like, yeah. I said, you're a caregiver. Because it's hard to help a caregiver if they don't even know they're a caregiver. So think about that. And there may be some people here that are just here for information that aren't caregivers right now. If you know a caregiver, call them up and tell them what a great job they're doing. Just do something nice to them. Just bring dinner over, or some flowers, or, you know, make an appointment for them to go get a manicure and set it up for them. I'll be there at 3, you need to be at the salon at 3:15. They'll be very grateful, and the person they're caring for will be very grateful, because everyone will be happier. Time is up. I'll be over here if anybody wants to talk to me. Remember me as the gal who cares for the caregivers, and have a delicious day.